gentlemen, please welcome on stage Dr. Ainojie Irune, Managing Director, Oando Energy Resources Nigeria Limited, Ilham Kadri, Chief Executive Officer, Syensqo, Billy Pizer, President and Chief Executive Officer, Resources for the Future, Liz Westcott, Executive Vice President and CEO Australia, Woodside Energy, Moderator, Ed Crooks, Vice Chair, Americas, Mackenzie.
Well, hello everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for attending this session. I have to thank very much Baker Hughes and Lorenzo for inviting me to take part in this fantastic event. I've been saying to my Baker Hughes friends, if the whole energy technology thing doesn't work out, I think a strategic pivot to conference organizing is going to be a very viable alternative. It really has been a wonderful event, and I'm sure you've all enjoyed it as much and have learned as much as I have from the past couple of days. So, here we're talking about the energy transition and the question of who wins in the transition. Seems to be a great question, it builds very well on what we've been hearing about already this morning, because I think it's fair to say that the transition towards lower carbon technologies in general in the energy industry has suffered some pretty significant setbacks, some delays in recent months. A couple of bits of evidence of that, I would say, is COP29. The failure to agree an ambitious climate finance deal at COP29 will be part of that. And the election of President Donald Trump in the US, very decisively turning away from climate policy, withdrawing the US from the Paris Climate Agreement, and very much focusing on increasing production of hydrocarbons rather than renewable energy. A bit more evidence of that. And I think a kind of a common thread linking a lot of these developments is this sense that people don't see themselves as winning in the transition. There has been kind of pushback from people in both developed countries and developing countries and emerging economies to say that kind of what's in it for us? We don't believe we're really being made better off by this move towards lower carbon energy. And so I guess that's really where I want to start this discussion, is to say, do you think that's right? Is there this general problem of kind of a sense there's not enough winners? And if so, what can be done about it? Ilham, maybe to start with you, do you think I've characterized the state of the world accurately?
Wow. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thanks, Lorenzo and Baker Hughes. Again, an amazing, season here in Florence. Listen, I don't think there are winners and losers. We will all win or lose together, to be honest with you. That's how I see it. I think people, looking at the benefits is because there is a big elephant in the room called transition has a cost, and who's going to pay for it, right? And I will kick off by maybe giving two angles. First, on putting, in opposition the legacy energies with the future source of energies. I think for me, it's the power of the end. You need the legacies energies because there is no sustainable life without energy. We all need energy like we need water. And you need it more efficient and productive. Lorenzo yesterday talks about abundant, affordable, and secure. That's what we need. To build our strong economies, you need strong industries, you need strong chemical industries. I represent today the hard-to-abate sector. Without energy, we are nothing, we are nobody. So I think you need to make those legacies, technologies, extremely efficient, productive, lower carbon emitting, and we can do it, and it means sustainability and profitability. With Baker Hughes, we are moving from rigid to flexible, cutting the cost of corrosion, which according to Aramco is $2.5 trillion every year. Look at how you can cut costs. We are, moving from metal to non-metallics, which also means productivity. And then you have those new source of energies, be it renewable, be it nuclear, hydrogen, etc. And I'm a scientist by background, and the history of science is that you go to a cost curve. And this is why the mantra of this session and the annual meeting this year is magnificent, is at scale. Scale, make it affordable. And we cannot do it alone, because in my 64 manufacturing sites around the world, to decarbonize them at cost, at affordability, I need scale. I need that ecosystem. So I think, first of all, we need to stop religiously putting the legacy fossil fuel against the future. Carbon is not the enemy. The necessity is the mother of innovation. And then the second piece is some lands have been blessed with oil and gas and others not. By the way, gas is back. So, you know, Europe has its unique challenge with energy prices, you know, 4 times higher than USA, right? And the Ukrainian war has exacerbated that supply chain and the vulnerability. US is, you know, drill, baby, drill. So that's the reality. And, you know, IRA or not, I think that there is a new mandate now which is going to show another way of investing in clean energies. Middle East is probably making the arbitrage, and they are doing both. They are blessed with oil and gas, and they are investing in NEOM and green hydrogen, and even UAE now buying low-carbon chemicals around the world. And China, you know, has been, you know, using this and building its state economy and onshoring strong value chains, including electrification, rare earths, and other critical things for the energy transition, with its own challenges, but definitely is keeping momentum on its transition.
Thanks very much indeed. And I want to drill down to a few of those points in a moment, particularly the issue you raised about Europe and energy costs in Europe specifically. Before we do that, though, Alex, I wonder if I could bring you in. I don't know what you think about this question and what we've been just hearing from Ilham now. Do you agree that part of the problem has been trying to pit traditional energies against new energies?
I think you did it justice. I'd say it's the one fundamental challenge that exists within the framework of the Paris Agreement, is this notion that for one to exist, one has to die. And I think if we take a step back for a moment and bring into view the elements that really constitute the transition, the lives at stake, there's genuine progress, and of course, saving the planet, right? I tend to look at it from the most fundamental and the most basic, lives at stake. We saw a reverse of the conversation that Africa keeps making at the table, which is the level of, or the capacity to fund these transitions just don't exist with the governments or with the people. We saw that come to life when the Ukraine war kicked off, and we saw when Europe was starved for gas. And all of a sudden, the value of a human life was viewed slightly different. You said it, gas is back. We didn't need that to point to the fact that we've got to take a holistic view. So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It is this idea that for one to exist, one has to die. I also believe that governments across the world have a duty to balance their budgets, and they must do it responsibly, with the transition in mind. You take a nation like Nigeria or Angola, where a primary foreign exchange source is the sale of crude and other products. It's really difficult to ask that economy to abandon what keeps it alive to pursue a purely green future. Now, that said, I think we're winning. I think globally we're winning. I think the problem is we look at the race from different perspectives and we judge the race from different perspectives. I think a swimmer that enters a competition and doesn't come first, but swims a personal best, in my view, has won, right? If you think about the progress being made across the energy value chain, I'm talking the new energy value chain, EVs, we've seen the prices of those vehicles, the engine systems, battery systems come down significantly. PV, photovoltaic, we've seen what's happened over the last 10, 15 years. Almost 80% drop in the cost of large utility photovoltaic installations. I think that is the path we must continue to go through. You spoke about it, scale, right?
Yeah.
Once you have scale, the prices come down, and then we can start to engage I would say the less capable segment of the transition story in that transition. But for now, I think countries have a responsibility to ensure that their borders are secure and their people progress in life.
Thanks. Liz, I wonder if I could bring you in here. I mean, I think it's interesting one of the implications I take from what Alex is saying is that we may be in a healthier position now in terms of our kind of understanding of the energy system, of what the needs of the world are, that perhaps 4 years ago, let's say, before COVID maybe, certainly before the Ukraine war, people had unrealistic ideas about how far the transition could progress and how it should progress. And now we see things in a bit of a clearer light. Is that fair, or how do you think about it?
I think that's a very accurate description, and particularly drawn to your phrase, the energy system, because we often talk about energy, and it's a system of energy that we're looking after, and we talk about the energy, the trilemma of having secure, affordable, and ever lower, cleaner energy, but it's actually the system that we're looking to get to that destination. And, it's going to be a long journey. It's something that we're trying to balance all of those three elements at all times. And I think the world, the industries have started listening better to society. So initially there was a lot of feedback around the need to make this energy system cleaner. And a lot of effort has been put in and continues in that regard. But of recent times, the secureness of the system and the affordability has become ever important. And so while needing to balance all three, we do need to hear the feedback. And, as we were saying, the most vulnerable have always been speaking up, perhaps, but even the developed world is now saying it's not affordable to us either. And so all of the pieces to make our system balanced in that regard need to play a role. And so we are now talking more about the traditional hydrocarbon business that does such a great job in that affordable, secure place. And for Woodside LNG, we see it as a fabulous fuel as part of this transition, and also as part of the destination, as we've all been encouraged with Lorenzo. And it provides flexibility, it's highly reliable, and it is a lower carbon solution, particularly if it's displacing coal for energy. So it's a real great part of the system. So I think, the more we can talk about balancing all three and the more we continue to listen, that way we will make sure people are winning.
Thank you. So Billy, I want to ask you, perhaps as the only American on the panel, to explain what's going on in your country and interpret it for us. I mean, as I said, at the beginning I just characterized the election of President Donald Trump in part as a signal from the American public that they thought progress with decarbonization was perhaps too rapid, that decarbonization was being prioritized ahead of other things they really care about, in other words, affordability, reliability, security of supply. Do you think that's fair, or is there something else going on, and what do you think the implications are then globally for the industry?
Well, thanks. I certainly think there are a lot of things going on. Certainly the election, the winds have changed. But at the same time, I think we need a little bit of time to let the dust settle and see what really is going to be the new regime. I totally agree in terms of this trilemma. Part of that shift in wind has been back towards affordability and reliability. So that makes a lot of sense. I do think lurking in the background of all of this is a conversation about the pace of change. I think this actually came up a minute ago, and the pace of the transition. You framed it as kind of a dichotomy of, one goes off, the other one goes on, and clearly it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. And the pace of the transition has an equity dimension that is really about the consequences of climate change, and ultimately, are they going to be worse than they would otherwise be because the transition takes a longer period of time? But I do feel like now might be a time to begin asking questions, or maybe we need to think about a little bit how we describe the pace of the energy transition, because we are more aware of how much it's going to cost. I think after 8 or 10 years since Paris, people are beginning to see, countries are beginning to see, companies are beginning to see exactly how long it takes. And the theme here, progress at scale, that we've been talking about, it takes time to achieve scale. It takes time for these technologies to be rolled out. And the faster you push them, the more expensive it's going to be. And so that's just a trade-off that people have to grapple with.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. And so I'm interested in asking you all really about what you now think the kind of the corporate responses should be and what you think you should be doing in your businesses and what the energy industry in general should be doing. Because, as Betty was saying, the wind has changed in many ways in terms of public opinion, in terms of politics, but something that's not changed is the logic of climate change. 2024 was the hottest year on record. We've seen more evidence of disasters being linked to climate change and so on. Over time, it is still the case that the world is going to have to move towards a lower carbon energy system. But then there are a lot of questions about the pace and the timing of that. I mean, Ilham, maybe bring you in first on this. What do you think, what's your company going to be doing? What do you think companies in the industry in general should be doing to continue to make progress?
Well, let me give you a piece of wisdom of Solvay. I had the honor to lead between 2019 and 2023. I split my company in two. But when I joined the company back in 2019, we were not aligned with Paris Accords, all right? So we were cutting the emission half of Paris required from us. And there was a belief within our company that sustainability cannot be synonymous to profitability. There were business cases coming to my table where the IRR was just not acceptable. At that time, the company return was around the cost of capital. So anyway, we joined the Paris Accords. We didn't know how to do it, but we knew that science will support us. We focused on scope 1 and 2. And what we did, I think the magic or the recipe for success was that we implemented a global carbon pricing within our company. So it was on tax, right pocket, left pocket, but it helped our business leaders to start train the muscle. Anyway, after 6 years, this is a 10 billion euro company, small scale, but yet we almost doubled our returns when I left the company in 2023. And we cut the emission twice what Paris required from us. And this is hard to abate. So that's scope 1 and 2. And then success calls success. We start looking at scope 3 because we are the scope 3 of our customers like Baker Hughes. And we started looking how we can bring those sustainable solutions, which makes these legacy energies and future energies more sustainable at lower total cost of ownership. So listen, it comes with an inner value and belief at this industry room, within the board of directors, CEOs and management teams. But again, we are not doing sustainability for charity. If you don't build the business case, if it's not sticky, if it's not a matter of years, then if it's not part of your business plans, right? If your business president, they don't think about it on Monday, not just on Friday afternoon or the end of the year, then it's sticky in your organization. And then I think what you need is your investors to back it up. Unfortunately, my company is headquartered in Europe. I can tell you, I didn't get a multiple or digits after the comma because of what we did in the sustainability arena. That's the reality, right? That's the real reality, even before, Trump elections. So I think specifically in Europe, we may talk about it later, you need this regulatory recognition for the good guys, and you need a level playing field, because the reality is that there is no global carbon pricing like in my company. Yeah. So I'm competing with people who are still producing with coal, etc., and I need that level playing field because I'm running, again, profit company.
So you mean there's a role for policy and for politicians, governments to take action?
Absolutely.
Right, yeah, no, that's interesting. Alex, wanted to see how you think about this. So you're in a hydrocarbon business from a resource-rich country. How do you think about your approach to the transition, the decisions you need to be taking, how it shapes your strategy, what investments you need to be making?
I think the...
Yeah, it might have dropped down a little bit. Yeah, try. Yeah, sorry, I think we may have a mic failure. Perhaps, Liz, why don't I come to you and we can, I don't know if we can fix his mic, thanks.
Look, absolutely. The question to me, one of the key ingredients, I think, is transparency. I think for businesses, similar to what we were just discussing, it's very important for companies to be quite open about the costs and benefits of the options that they face and explain the choices they're making and why they are. I think it's also important that we do have visibility on the types of targets and strategies we're pursuing. So as Woodside, we do have a published carbon price. We use that to guide the decarbonisation of all of our assets. We have published emissions targets, and we also have a capital framework that's published that talks about the rate of return we're seeking on different types of investments. So traditional hydrocarbon, whether it be oil or gas, as well as new energy types of products. And we explain why we do that. Now, we're a listed company. It's very important to make sure that we invest the shareholders' money wisely. And so, we need to be careful that we are very transparent with what we're doing. So I think that's incumbent on companies. Also, though, is the role of government, and we started to touch into that. And I think the more governments can start to have a fact-based discussion about the transition and really talk about, again, the costs and the benefits of various energy sources and types for their location, their country, the way they can talk about the role of gas in particular as a great fuel and how it plays so many roles and that it isn't the demon, and talk about the different technologies available and why they're thinking a particular technology or other is suited better to their location. In doing that, they can open up and talk about investment. It's very important, I think, for governments to recognise that gas is a finite resource and that it won't continue to be available unless we continue to invest. And so having stable policy frameworks, having efficient regulatory systems where the red and green tape is not just growing but is actually reducing to enable investment, then allows investors and business to pursue the really necessary investments, particularly in gas. And it also allows society to understand why that's necessary. So, I think there's a role for us, there's a role for government, but perhaps the role for everyone is to actually try and continue to work together more. This conference is a great place for all of us to be working together, wherever you are in this energy system, whether you're in the finance side, delivery side, customer side. Continuing to work together, I think, gives us our best chance of making all this work.
Thank you. Alex, I was asking you about your approach to the transition.
Yes, thank you. I think the fact is that we would have to lead this transition. I'm talking the fossil fuel companies. I think one of the speakers spoke about commercial viability, and when you look on the continent, and I'm talking Africa, that problem exists. When we set up the clean energy division of Oando in 2021, it was, the idea there was to take balance sheet risk and advance a significant amount of clean energy projects for three key reasons. The first, to of course test the technology and localize it. Second was to build the capacity to operate and run in a sustainable way these technologies, but also to create the foundation for other companies, especially smaller companies, to latch onto this. And on the back of this, we've built 5 verticals where we look at photovoltaic, we look at EVs. We're working with the largest state in Lagos, second largest in the continent, to move its public mass transit from ICEs, as internal combustion engines, to electric vehicles. We're working on our facilities and operations where we're starting to use turbines that use steam instead of diesel to run our operations. We also have a keen interest in wind, where we started the first complete study around the country to test for the availability of wind to drive power generation. And lastly, waste to value, non-primary feedstock to value is what we call it. And the idea here is really to ensure that as an oil and gas company, we can step forward and test these things and make them available from a funding perspective and an accessibility perspective, and ensure that we can effectively drag everyone along. And I think that's the responsibility of companies of our size and our nature. Everyone else has spoken about government. Government's important. Partnerships, Baker Hughes and all the other partners that are looking in the same direction and able to chart this part with you, because I say for us in the continent, it's a very unique problem we're trying to solve. Today, you'll be pushing very hard to ask people to pay 10 cents per kilowatt hour for electricity. So the challenge there is very unique, and it needs to be approached in that way. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I want to think about one specific problem in the transition, which is disruption and impacts on communities. And I know, Liz, this is something you've thought about and worked on a great deal as an operator, where you have transition occurring and you're perhaps shifting from one technology to another, or one resource to another, whatever it might be, and you can have communities that are totally reliant on one sector or one industry, very heavily reliant, and disruption causes enormous economic damage to those communities. And that clearly is something that people then often kind of resist in the transition. It's a reason why people will vote against energy transition, because they don't want to see their communities disrupted. How do you manage those kind of challenges?
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation, because we can talk at the global macro level, but for so many people it's actually what's happening in their street and what's happening in their community that really matters. So, you know, Woodside, its foundation asset is in the northwest of Australia. For people who haven't been to Australia, there's not many people up there. There's maybe 20,000 people as the community around where our assets are. We've been in operation for 40 years, building out 5 LNG trains, and we're now in a period of field decline, and so we've shut in our first train in the last 3 months. But neighbouring asset is also now in a growth phase, and so we're building a second train on that asset. And the community really wants to know what's going on. So that community's grown up with multi-generations working in our facilities. And so for them, this is very real and frightening if they don't understand. So transparency, again, has been critical. Talking with the community very openly about what's happening. We've got one asset, yes, it's going into decline. We're looking to backfill the trains if we can, but then we've got another asset and we're building it, and then that'll be up and operating. And explaining to them what our pathways are. And that's a combination. We work with the actual community, you know, council members and the like. We work with our suppliers. It's very important for suppliers and supply chains to know what your future is. We work with government, and we also work with our employees. And so individually understanding what this will mean for them. And they really want to be part of the journey. And so for us to be able to really embrace that thought, we need to really understand the impact we're having. So conversations provide one lens, but we're moving to much more formal assessments of the social and economic impact that our industry has today and what that will look like going forward, what sort of management plans community should be thinking about, how could government assist in moving forward. So a lot of work that we need to do to have this as a joint journey. There's a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different needs, but we also then try and look and learn from others. We aren't the first industry to go through a transition, and we're not the first location potentially for an industry to depart. And so learning from the coal industry, learning from the car industry in Australia, we can see what's worked well, how you bring in new employers into the region. So a lot of really boots on the ground work. You can't just do this in a head office setting. You really need to have people out there who live in a part of the community and can really give you that feedback.
So talking about learning from others, I know, Billy, this is something you've studied and worked on a lot, the costs of disruption. What lessons have you learned from that, and what do you think it's important for the energy industry to hear about ways to manage that transition successfully?
Sure. So I'm not only the only American, I'm the only leader of a nonprofit organization here. So we at Resources for the Future, we're doing economic research to try to figure out, how do you balance, a healthy environment and a growing economy. And one of the big issues we've looked at, actually, with partnership with Baker Hughes, has been fossil communities, how they're impacted by a transition to lesser or lower amounts of fossil fuels, and also what can you do about it. So, the impacts are not just jobs and the economy, they're public finance, where the tax base goes down. And a lot of this has to do with thinking about how to create more resilience in these communities to these economic transitions. And what we've found when we go into these communities is, first of all, it's all, as you kind of were saying, very contextual for the community you're in, the obstacles, the opportunities, the interests of those communities. And when we do that, like for example, we were working in western Colorado in a very rural area. It turned out that the biggest issues for them were access to transportation. Like if you're trying to diversify your economy, you need to have people and products able to go there. They also needed capacity to interact with the government, the federal government that provides a lot of assistance. And finally, they needed to have the right sorts of skills because the workforce that was used to one type of activity needed to have the right skills for other types of activities. But you really have to go into each of these communities to try to understand what's happening. And part of this project that I was mentioning is trying to develop almost kind of a set of cases the different companies could use in different communities.
Thank you. So we're running a bit short of time, but Ilham, I promised I would give you a chance to talk about Europe and the particular challenges of chemicals industry in Europe. I think it's just a really important illustrative case because the cost of transition, the costs of lower carbon technologies being higher, risks making European industry uncompetitive, big concern in Europe right now. What do you think is the right way to address those concerns?
Wow. Yeah, it's a perfect storm in Europe as we speak. Listen, Europe had a great ambition to be, and we're calling on Europe to have an ambition to do as we speak. The Green Deal was there. I mean, most of my peers, the members of the Chemical Association in Europe or globally, including headquartered in the US, we're not debating the what of the Green Deal. We know that we have to save our planet because I'm a humanist. It's home for humanity, human being. The thing is, the how failed. We lost 5 years on a Green Deal because there was no industrial deal, because there was no energy roadmap in Europe. So Europe now is at tipping point, specifically wake-up call with the Trump election. It's going to shake up even more the tree if needed. I think Europe needs to do few things. And I was pleased to hear Ms. President Ursula von der Leyen in Davos last week talking about simplification, regulatory simplification. To give you an example, in my past 6 years I spent in Europe, there was 14,000 pages of regulation just for the chemical industry, with the soup of alphabet in reporting, CSRD, taxonomy, CSDDD, etc. A company like mine, I can manage that. The 80% of the chemical industrial fabric in Europe is SMEs. They cannot manage this. Regulatory simplification. We need a dodge, if I want to be a bit provocative, in Europe, right? And we need, regulatory cohesion. The problem of Europe is that there is no single market. It was the old dream of Delors. What is this single market? I'm in the board of L'Oréal. There are 27 labels, with the same shampoo. That we don't have that single market. And we can talk about clean and low carbon solution. We need demand. No demand, no market. What is starting with the public procurements, by the way. So that's cohesion, regulatory framework, which is simple and easy to adopt. Faster permitting. Permitting is insane in Europe. I know some, windmills makers, right? 4 years. Actually, in my company, it took me 2.5 years just to, get the permitting for a low-carbon solution to decarbonize an asset in Europe. And the last one is that regulatory recognition I talked about. And listen, we don't want medals. We're not looking for that. I think we own our agenda. We need a capital market union. There is none. There is none in Europe. People, as we speak, unfortunately, we are seeing in the chemical industry, just to give you an idea, in 2024, there was 11 million tons of capacity shut down announced. This is 4% of the chemical industry capacity. Europe was number 1 a few years ago. We lost 11% market share in the past decade. China won 9%. So coming back to this, it looks like sobering and a lot of, tough things, but it's time for leadership in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's great points and hope they are listened to. So I do want to end just briefly on a more positive note then. Let's not focus on the challenges too much. Think about what makes us optimistic? What gives you all hope that we can achieve the progress at scale we're talking about here to meet the world's needs for energy and also to tackle climate change? When Alex, maybe to start with you, what gives you hope?
I spoke about that briefly earlier on, and it's just the fact that technology is moving in the right direction that we want it to. I say that the global south pretty much have a monopoly on the sun, so it will be almost egregious not to focus on renewable energy that is free, effectively. So that's a positive for us. The governments are also starting to take this seriously. I think you're probably suffering in Europe for the curse of the blessed. I think those of us that are fighting the deal of spending a bit more time thinking about what the pathway should be so we don't get forced into going down a path that we can't afford. So there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of consultations. We work with the governments to come up with the policies and the regulations. So there's sort of like a close cohesion there. And the final thing for me is the fact that the world has finally pivoted to a more sensible track. Right. We're waiting for COP to get the message, but the rest of us sitting out here and in the crowd know that it can't be one or the other, it must be both.
Thank you. Ilham, what about you? What gives you hope?
It's people and people and people. It's ingenuity. I'm a humanist and scientist, right? That's the story of innovation. Life expectation, I grew up in native Africa, a bit northern than you, in Morocco. I grew up in a very humble home, and here we are in front of you. So the world is building prosperity, and I think humanity, scientists are going to find solutions to climate change. The challenge, but the opportunity is to do it with profitability, walk before running, and have faith. And hope in the next generation.
Thank you. Billy, what about you?
Well, I like technology and I like people. I guess I would just add, I'm excited that I feel like we're having a lot more real conversations now. After all this time, we have a lot of experience, and I'm excited about the prospect these real conversations are going to lead to even more real progress.
Thank you. Liz, last word.
Yeah, it's one of the world's biggest challenges, certainly for our generations, and yet we're surrounded by organisations with massive history and proof points that they can tackle these massive challenges. So I think all the companies and organisations represented here can absolutely deliver.
A great note to end on. Thank you all very much indeed. Great discussion. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Baker Hughes. Thank you.
Yeah.